mandates and so on. And this, of course, has necessitated a change in how we do business, in how we think about our foreign policy, in where we want to go as a nation, and how we want to posture for the rest of the world. So as we think through these things and as we relook at our strategies and work to expand our reach and our influence across the world, and as we empower ourselves, both here at Capitol in our various missions, but also through our diaspora, this colloquium comes, I think, at an opportune time, really, for us to assess what it is that we practice, to take stock of what we've done well, to note the challenges that we have experienced, and new avenues for us to explore and to think about, new areas for us, new paths for us to go down, and finally, for us to project and agree on the implementation approaches that are effective and efficient in execution of our foreign policy going forward. We have to adjust and adapt the way we do things to maybe keep up or probably lead an ever-evolving world. I don't want to say much at this point, ladies and gentlemen. I will be presenting a little bit later, perhaps a little more deeply about diaspora diplomacy. And reflecting on the journey of the last 20 months that we've had a State Department for Diaspora Affairs. So mine is just to appreciate Ambassador Kiruthu and your team for putting this together in such a beautiful way. And going by those here present, it appears it's going to be an extremely exciting and inclusive process. And to just thank the people who are here and say that we look forward to the wealth of information and experience in working through and looking forward to this new or revised Kenya foreign policy. So then it is therefore my singular honor, as has been asked of me by my big brother in every possible way, to invite Waziri Mkuu, His Excellency Musalia Mudavadi, to speak to us. Asanteni sana.
Asante sana, please be seated. Before I make my remarks, let me just tell Dr. Abraham Singoi, it's actually a historical moment. And I want to assure you, my colleagues here, that I'm acting in all those portfolios, but I have no acting allowance. So we are implementing the austerity measures, so hakuna kitu. Sometimes we call them what? Sasa ni balozi wa nchi kavu. What was that phrase? All right. So let me make my formal remarks. The Honorable Dr. Singoi, State Department for Foreign Affairs, PS Roslyn Jogu, PS State Department for Diaspora Affairs, my colleague there, Monica Juma, our National Security Advisor, all PSS present, retired ambassadors, Director Generals, heads of directorates, experts and scholars, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I am pleased to join you all in this colloquium that gives us an opportunity to reflect on Kenya's foreign policy. I thank all of you for accepting our invitation. Indeed, I congratulate you for being part of a critical team identified to contribute to such a noble national process of reviewing the foreign policy of the Republic of Kenya. Indeed, yours is a patriotic service. As we embark on this critical review of our foreign policy, it is important to recognize the significance of your role in this process. Yours is a patriotic service. Your contributions will be invaluable, and you can take pride in knowing that a robust foreign policy, enriched by your expertise, will ultimately benefit and transform our nation and the lives of its citizens. We are taking major steps to develop an all-inclusive foreign policy in terms of scope and stakeholder engagement to advance the national interests of our republic. And none understands this better than the ladies and gentlemen in this room. And that is the reason you have been identified for the colloquium. They say two heads are better than one, and with all of us here, we should be able to tackle not only our foreign policy, but also answer the perennial question: what came first, the chicken or the egg? Since the foreign policy document was first published in 2014, a decade ago, we have witnessed the impact of momentous changes in the global environment. Kenya's national interests have also considerably expanded as our country seeks to play a greater role in international affairs. Equally important, the ministry has undergone restructuring to align with the domestic and foreign policy priorities of the government. To this end, the review process needs to capture the principles of open governance and public participation. We cannot continue handling our foreign policy as a secret agenda, literally foreign to our citizens. This underscores the need for a sessional paper to bolster inclusive participation, leverage parliamentary democracy to transcend partisan politics in foreign policy projection, and indeed justify funding of foreign policy implementation. Historically, we have had sessional papers in other sectors, including one on devolution, yet none on foreign policy. You are all aware of the public sentiments, especially during the recent political events, where citizens questioned the significance of the president's foreign trips and his energized diplomatic engagements. Kenya cannot recluse itself from the international community. Kenya is in fact not an island, and our president is not Robinson Crusoe living in isolation. His Excellency is more like a captain of a ship, navigating with a full crew of millions of citizens whom he must serve and steer towards prosperity. Even those who vehemently protest about the coconuts on the island. Nonetheless, this points to a decades-long missing link between our foreign policy objectives and their appreciation by the domestic population. These are some of the issues the review process is expected to address. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya's diplomatic history reveals Kenya's crucial roles in promoting regional integration through the East African Community, IGAD, and COMESA, as well as championing continental issues through the African Union and the African Continental Free Trade Area. There is need for Kenya to strengthen its regional support networks. Nairobi hosts the headquarters of two global United Nations offices, UNEP and UN Habitat, and the UN headquarters in Africa, UNON, together with over 80 agencies and international organizations. Still, the foreign policy conundrum of our time is that Kenya has to navigate a fluid international environment that is experiencing growing multipolarity and diminishing multilateralism. It will be essential for participants in this colloquium to interrogate how Kenya should strategize and position itself in an international arena that is increasingly experiencing geopolitical disruptions due to the evident shift to multipolarity. In this regard, I am optimistic about the sessions on the evolution of Kenya's foreign policy, and in particular the one on the geopolitical context. It will, for instance, be interesting to get insights on the implications of ongoing geopolitical realignments on governance and politics in Africa, and indeed Kenya. Today, the peace and security pillar remains as significant in our foreign policy as it was decades ago. This is more so given that the nature of peace and security challenges continue to evolve. Global crises such as the Russia-Ukraine war, COVID-19, the Gaza war, and the Red Sea crisis swiftly impact on our peace and security. Therefore, it shall be very important to identify national, regional, and global peace and security priorities of our foreign policy. We appreciate to national development through remittances and direct investments. Yesterday evening, in the company of the PS Njogu, I bade farewell to a group of 30 teachers heading to the USA to take up paying jobs. The PS of the State Department of Diaspora pointed out that over the last year, the diaspora remittances reached Kenya shillings 671 billion. Just imagine that. Here, I thank the State Department for Diaspora for the great progress in reviewing the diaspora policy to make it relevant to the legal and socioeconomic dynamics that our citizens abroad face today. For example, it will be necessary to put our expert thoughts on strategies and mechanisms for responding to Kenyans in distress abroad. Today, economic and commercial diplomacy ranks high in Kenya's foreign policy priorities. This pillar is apparently a common thread running through all the foreign policy pillars. Kenya will need to enhance strategies in advocating for reforms of the international economic and commercial architecture. For example, transnational corporations and other international actors are influencing global policies through lobbying for conditions that favor their operations. This threatens the survival of our infant domestic industries. Additionally, we need to assess the economic and even geopolitical implications of groupings and forums such as the G7, G20, and BRICS, and many others. Global discourses on environmental degradation, climate action, and financing have taken center stage in international relations. The need for transition from fossil fuels, demands for critical minerals for electric vehicle batteries, and carbon credits present opportunities for Kenya. There's also the complex nexus between climate change and security. The internet and artificial intelligence are creating jobs and powerful interactive platforms shaping public opinions and tastes. However, we must deal with cybercrime, misinformation, and disinformation and breaches of private data that are reversing these gains. I'm sure you have all experienced this in the last few days. Ladies and gentlemen, many countries in Africa, including Kenya, are experiencing a youth bulge, whereas the aging population is the growing norm in the global north. Deployment of soft power, including cultural diplomacy, educational exchanges, and international media, is not only shaping public opinion, but also building and maintaining global influence. Elsewhere, the contemporary multi-power world order has opened space for emerging powers like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that is BRICS, to assert their influence on world affairs. These global trends are redefining our foreign policy. It is imperative that we continuously evaluate and adapt our foreign policy to ensure that it remains relevant and effective in promoting our national interests and values. The 2024 foreign policy document must be realigned to take into account these emerging trends and focus on how it can promote and safeguard our national interests. In March this year, when I delivered my remarks on Kenya's grand strategy in a changing world, I pointed out that today Kenya has evolved from perceived limited geopolitical roles to regional and global prominence. Kenya's geopolitical ascent under President Ruto's leadership has made our country the strongest link in the chain of regional and continental unity. The position of our country is not fringe. We are at the center of decision-making to answer regional and global diplomatic questions. This process enables Kenya to adopt its own thinking, planning, and evidence-based decision-making in foreign policy. I encourage you to identify areas for bottom-up transformative change from our international engagements. For instance, what strategies should we develop to translate our great performance internationally into domestic dividends, including economic growth, better quality of life, and the beneficial geopolitical influence? Some additional questions for discussions include: what strategies can we employ to sufficiently fund our diplomatic missions abroad? We may need to think out of the box, including the effective use of our assets abroad in resourcing our foreign service and the foreign policy objectives. Also how well we are grounded in the multilingual and indeed multi-skilled preparation of our youth and foreign service officers for global engagements. Accordingly, the future of our nation's place on the global stage depends on the strength and clarity of the foreign policy we craft together. With your expertise and dedication, we can develop a policy that advances Kenya's national interests globally. Let us make this process a testament to what we can achieve when we unite for a common purpose, the good and greatness of our homeland. This colloquium is an opportunity to reflect on our past achievements, critically assess our current approaches, and envision a future where Kenya collectively continues to thrive and lead on the global stage. It is now my pleasure to officially open the colloquium on the review of Kenya's foreign policy. I wish you fruitful and engaging deliberations. Thank you. Asanteni sana. And I can see there's the table of the veterans here. And others are in other places. Thank you for all being part of this. And we look forward to drawing from your wisdom and experience. Asanteni sana. Thank you.